we have somebody, a food co-op, a developer, someone interested in starting up a co-op in Duval, which there is a resident-owned community, a mobile home cooperative in Duval right now called Duval Riverside. Not sure if you're familiar with that one. Okay. So yeah, and it sounds like as well, people are already kind of familiar with the business model canvas. So this will be a good refresher. I'm going to do things a little bit differently. Usually with groups, we would kind of set time to kind of do like some 5 minutes on each section so that you're actually building out your business model canvas as we go along. Well, maybe we'll do this a little bit differently since we don't really have groups and we already have people that are kind of already familiar with it. I'll kind of do more of a review of some of the online tools available. So this is a business model canvas, designing, discussing, and reinventing your business model within a cooperative framework. I'm going to stop. Everybody can see my screen? Good. I'm going to stop the video so you're not looking at the side of my face the whole time. Also, feel free to interrupt with questions as we go along. So John's gonna be keeping his eye out on the chat box. So feel free to use the chat box. John, just let me know if questions pop up and we can address them as they come. So our agenda is simple, very much like the canvas we will be talking about today. Simplicity is a defining attribute for today and a tool that we will be reviewing. It doesn't always mean easier or less than. It is a distillation of the core components, right? So by the end of the day, we should have a business plan on one page. Typically, that's what we would do. And we'll spend some time during an overview. We'll dive a little bit deeper into the 9 fundamental building blocks. And then I'll talk a little bit more about how to use it. So has anyone seen this book before? This is what this whole business model canvas was based off of, was this book. I actually have this book with me. So this is a 1.5 overview, kind of 1.5 hour overview based on this book, which can be applicable to not just for-profits, but also nonprofits and of course, cooperatives as well. So right, this is not like a co-op book. It's a business strategy book. And it was developed by Alexander Osterwalder, who was a Swiss business theorist. This book and this canvas is very much a tool that you would think would come out of Silicon Valley. It actually came out of Switzerland. Although it's become popularized by a lot of major tech companies that use it. And now they're kind of seeing this as a tool, not just for large tech companies, but for nonprofits as well. Pretty much any business model, because we're really just focusing on a business model. And so this can even be applied to nonprofits. And as you already know, co-ops are a type of business. This book, Value Proposition Design, it's an entire book on one of the building blocks that we're going to be talking about today. So you can dive pretty deep into value proposition design, and we're just going to kind of skim the surface a little bit. So the business model canvas is essentially a business plan on one page. It is a visual tool for developing new or existing business models. So the business model canvas takes a look at 9 key elements for developing your business model. And so what it really does, it takes seemingly complex things and makes them easy to understand. And we'll talk about how it does that. It has this modular framework, which is good because it's interconnected. So we're able to tie certain elements of the business model canvas, say value proposition, to your customer segments. It is also group oriented. So this is really important. And so this is a good brainstorming tool that you can do within your group, within your cooperative. or with a co-op that you're starting up. So great group-oriented activity, although we kind of have to do it a little bit differently now. So I'll talk about some of the ways we were doing it in person, and then I'm going to actually share some ways that we can do it online as well. But this business model canvas, this visual tool, it serves several different functions. So this is a visual mapping tool. So you can think of it like designing a blueprint for a house, like a landscaping design for your home. This is a useful tool for starting a conversation. It can be used to onboard new members into your cooperative and give them an easy way to understand the business dynamics to your cooperative. I think it's a great way to onboard somebody into the co-op. It can also be used to discuss with outside stakeholders or investors, or even use it as part of your loan application. I've seen these business model canvases, if done properly, function a lot better than, say, a 15-page business plan because it forces you to be concise. I also use this as a technical assistance provider sometimes when we're working with some startup co-ops and they're still kind of in that brainstorming phase about what their business model is. They completely understand the values behind being a cooperative, but they really haven't nailed down what the service or product they are providing. And so part of this, what I have them do is take a stab at creating this business model canvas, and then we can use this as like a starting point to discuss kind of what their co-op would look like and how that affects the bylaws as well. This is also good for reinventing. So this is not specifically just for startups. Any well-established business can use this canvas to reevaluate where you stand, identify weaknesses, and brainstorm on how to scale your business. So this is important to note. This is not just for startups. This is great for already established cooperatives. I think of it as an evergreen document, something that you're constantly going back to and reevaluating at least once a year. And this is the canvas. Ashley will provide links and PDFs to a lot of what we're going to be sharing today. And so I'll be uploading that into a Google Drive, I believe, John, that we can easily share out. But this is the canvas. So what we're going to do is we're going to quickly review each block and talk about how we can also adapt it to a cooperative business. So we're going to kind of go into each of one of these, look at them through a business model, just traditional business model lens, but we also kind of want to talk about what does it mean for a co-op. So we'll describe each one of these and then we'll want to fill in the blanks. But before we do that, let's talk about storytelling. And storytelling is an undervalued and underused art in the world of business, but it is a very powerful tool to make new business models more tangible. Whereas a business model canvas helps you sketch and analyze a new model or an existing one, storytelling will help you effectively communicate what it's all about. So these are equally important, having your business model, but being able to explain that to different audiences, right? And that might be investors or your different customer segments. So storytelling is a big part of marketing. So we're not gonna maybe take 10 minutes to do this, but what I would actually have groups do, and maybe this is something that you can do on your own time, is we have participants break out into groups. We give them 10 minutes to come up with a story of who they are, of who the cooperative is, right? And what they offer. That's a big part of it. And then the goal is to come up with a 3-minute story, like an elevator pitch, that each group can report out on, right? And so we'll skip this. Sometimes I use this as a good way to do introductions. But maybe actually, and we kind of already did a little bit of introduction, so we'll save this for later. But some questions to ask is, and to develop this story is, who are you, right? Who is the co-op? Um, what differentiates you, the co-op, from your competition? And democracy in a workplace is a great place to start. Um, what is your mission and values? Who do you help? And what motivates you? These are just some of the questions that can help formulate your story about what the co-op is. You don't have to answer all of these in your story, but it helps to actually touch on some of these, right? Has anyone done this before? Created a story for their co-op or for their business? Like a 3-minute story? I'm not sure if we even have one for NWCDC, but we kind of have, sometimes organizations use a mission statement, which is similar. All right. So we're going to take a deep dive into each of the 9 elements. These are slides that I use to just kind of break things up and then also remind me of what I'm going to talk about next. It's just a facilitator tool, FYI. All right, so the first one is customer segments. So customer segments define different groups of people or organizations a business aims to reach and serve, right? And so these are the different types of customer segments. Customer segments can be groups of people, it can be organizations, whatever is the type of group that you think you need to aim. It's obvious to say that without customers, you do not have a business. And however, this sometimes gets lost when thinking about starting up a business. It's not uncommon for entrepreneurs to solely think about the need or a problem that exists for them without thinking of who else shares these same needs, right? How many of you will be customers of your own business, right? In a food co-op, that's probably definitely the case, right? And so that's great. So now think about who you are as a customer and who else could possibly share these same needs and problems, right? And so demographics can be broken up in different ways. It can be based on age, geography, behavioral attributes. There's a lot of different ways to kind of break up your customer segments. What you see on the right is different types of customer segments. So mass market, it does not focus on different customer segments. A good example of mass market is usually like electronics company where they're just, every customer segment is a possible customer and buyer, right? A niche market is caters to a specific or specialized customer segments. So maybe this is like a alpaca yarn shop or a bike shop, right? Um, Something that's very, very specialized, and we have a niche, a small kind of custom. It doesn't have to be a small customer base, but it's a very well defined customer base. There's also a segmented customer segment. So some businesses cater to customers with slightly different needs and problems. And so this could be the case with food co-ops as well, right? Some people might be shopping at food co-ops for health-related reasons. Some people might be shopping at food co-ops because they want to support local economies. Some people might be shopping at your food co-op because it's the closest grocery store to them. And so we can define each one of these different customer segments using the business model canvas. Again, this is a brainstorming activity. And so hopefully you would have other people kind of weighing in and defining what those customer segments could be. There's also diversified. So these are people with completely unrelated needs and problems. An example of this might be a credit union. There are customers that need banking services, but there's also loans that need to be made. And so there's people that are depositing their money in order invest, right? And so there are people that are using banks for very different reasons. And then multi-sided platforms, not very common in the co-op world. John, you may know of one. This might be something like I think the popular example for this one is Visa. So you actually have the users who actually have the credit cards and using it, and then the shops that all accept the different. So they're interconnected. Is the key thing with these multi-sided platforms. Interdependent customers. So you have people that are actually using the credit cards, and the shops that are have accept the different credit cards, and then the companies that are taking a certain percentage from the customers as well. So it's a different interconnected customer segments. And so the questions to ask here is, for whom are we creating value? And who are our most important customers? Now I'll take a minute. We'll just take a minute to pause here actually and think about this. And maybe some of you can think about, like, who are we creating value for? Who are our most important customers? It's a very specific question. The second question I think can throw some people off, right? Who are our most important customers? Usually when you're asking this question, it's tied to revenue. So I'll just pick on food co-ops. Who are your most important customers? Well, those might be families, right? People that are regular buyers, somebody that's spending $100 at your food co-op once a week. Let's see. And real quick, I just lost video of everybody. Is everyone still there?
Everyone's still
there. Okay, good. I think when John finally turned off his video, then it just disappeared. So who are our most important customers? It's a funny question, usually tied to revenue and different customer segments that might be bringing in the most amount of revenue. So again, with food co-ops, maybe it's a family of 4, right? And that's the most important customer. You know, a co-op is also, it's more than just a business too. So you might want to reframe this question as well. It's still important to find out which customers are going to be driving in the most revenue, but you also maybe want to define customer segments that are important for other reasons. So maybe low-income families that would not be able to shop at the store because of high prices, you know, but we still want to be able to provide these local and organic foods to these customers. So yes, revenue is kind of the driving force behind this question, but it's important to know that we could reframe this question in different ways as well, because a co-op is often a triple bottom line business. It's more than just profit. There's also social and environmental costs behind it as well. Value proposition. So value proposition describes the bundle of products and services that create value for a specific customer segment, So this value proposition, there could be multiple value propositions depending on your customer segment, right? So this is a reason why value propositions are a reason why customers turn to one company over another. And you can break down the value proposition into 2 main categories. Does it solve a customer need, or does it solve a customer problem? Some value propositions might be completely new and innovate, while others may be similar to what already exists in the market, but offers maybe added features or attributes. So if you're entering a market that already exists, you need to ask yourself, what makes you different? As a cooperative, being a democratically run organization, I think this is a big difference and added value that should be promoted, right? And so being a democratic workplace, being worker-owned, are great ways to distinguish you from other businesses. So value propositions could be like, we have the lowest prices, right? For a co-op, it could be that, but we also know that there's a lot of people that want to shop now based on values. And so incorporating that into your value proposition is going to be very important. With value,
Daniel,
yeah.
if I can just jump in real quick. There's a comment from Sandra I just want to read that she talks about for a co-op developer or nonprofit, this is the essence of our challenge. Funders are in a sense most important, but we serve the particular groups we serve who cannot generally pay for what they receive. The previous slide made that crystal clear, and that made me think of, very often especially in the service industry, the people paying and choosing the service aren't the people who receive it. So like a caseworker might select which home care agency to use, but the person receiving the home care may or may not have a lot of choice in that. And so it's, so for value, when I was with the taxi cab co-op, for a lot of our HMOs that we worked with, providing Medicaid transportation, for them, the value was being on time and having really clear billing. They didn't care about the price at all.
That's a really good point. And I think that's a good reason to kind of, and when we talk about customer segments, is actually do research into consumer values. It's a pretty popular thing to do with food co-op, is to do some sort of consumer survey. And that can help inform your value proposition. And again, there will be different value propositions. You can get pretty granular on specific things. And so maybe you have a value proposition for a particular customer segment or a specific service. Let's say you offer multiple services, you might have different value proposition for each one of those services. It's always, I think, good to have one kind of balcony level view value proposition. So that kind of overarching mission of the co-op, that purpose, is good to have in that value proposition. The other thing I think is important to add here, and especially for, well, not just for worker co-ops, but I think especially for worker co-ops and putting this back into a cooperative framework is, all right, what's the value proposition for your customers, the ones that are bringing in the revenue and shopping and buying, right? But also, what's the value proposition for becoming a worker owner or for becoming an owner of the food co-op, right? And so this is a case where I think co-ops need to have two different types of value propositions. One, just not just for the people that are buying or shopping, but also your worker owners. To the right, you kind of see some categories of things that people touch on often for value proposition. So sometimes it's newness, sometimes it's customization. So sometimes it's performance, right? I think performance is a good thing for some of the home care co-ops. I think they're able to say that they're able to perform better as home caregivers and provide a better care and service because they are owners. Accessibility is another important part of value proposition. Price is one of the most common ones, but not necessarily one of the ones that's going to motivate people necessarily. It depends, right? Depends on your business model. Brand and status, so just having that brand can be important. Usability, I think, is a very important one as well. So making sure that you have a product that is easy to use or a service that's easy to understand. Convenience, we live in the age of convenience, so also very important part for different businesses, and design as well. So having thoughtful design. So yeah. So questions to ask when you're coming up with your value proposition. And again, there's an entire book on this. So we're just kind of, we're taking this balcony level view, but what value do we deliver to the customer, right? Which one of our customer problems are we helping to solve? And what bundles of products and services are we offering to each customer segment? Right, so this last question is specific for co-ops or groups that are going to have different customer segments. So again, we want to get a little bit granular and address each customer segment. Channels is building block number 3. It describes on how a company communicates and reaches its customer segments to deliver a value proposition, right? So this is interconnected. How are we going to deliver that value proposition to the customer segments that we just described? And again, if you have different customer segments, you might have different channels. It's not necessarily so, but it is definitely a possibility. And these are the 5 channel phases. Some will be more or less important to your business model. Some are simple, while others are a little bit more complex. So we have awareness. How do we raise awareness? Will you have a marketing strategy, right? This marketing symposium will be covering that. So how do we raise awareness? I think this is one of the first steps, but often a part where co-ops kind of sometimes fail to get to. We're spending so much time just kind of trying to maybe keep the co-op afloat or do all the other things that we forget about this. So how do we raise awareness and what is our marketing strategy? Evaluation. So how do we help customers evaluate our organizational value proposition, right? How do customers purchase your value proposition? Is it a storefront? Is it online? Well, it's probably going to be more online right now for some places, not for a food co-op. Delivery. So how is your value proposition delivered? So at a food co-op, it's going to be delivered right at the store. For a home care co-op, it's going to be delivered directly at someone's home, right? And then after sales, how do we provide post-purchase support? And so this kind of comes back to evaluation, but this is again doing research on how well are we doing, right? And so as an organization, we might do an evaluation survey to all our attendees to see how well we're doing. We take that feedback and we're going to put it back into our marketing strategy. So questions to ask. There's a lot more questions to ask here for the channels. Through which channels do our customer segments want to be reached? And how are we reaching them now? How are our channels integrated? Which one works best? That's a really important question. We might have multiple channels, but are we spending too much time on some channels that are not performing very well? Which ones are most cost efficient? Also very, very, very important. I've seen this, well, take a resident-owned community, a mobile home park, right? It might be very efficient to go door to door and create flyers for someone, and that's a great way to communicate with them. That's also not a very cost-efficient way to communicate with people, taking that time to go door to door and creating those flyers. So you want to make sure that we're balancing cost efficiency with performance. And how are we integrating them with customer routines, right? And so when we define our customer segments, we're going to want to make sure that we're matching up these channels with each one of these customer segments. And so different channels could be like email, right? It could be Facebook. It could be a website. So we want to define which one of those channels works best. So if you have a customer segment that is maybe 65 and older, maybe email works best, maybe Facebook, right, works best, maybe not so much with millennials anymore. If you have a Gen Z kind of target segment, maybe it's TikTok, I don't know, Instagram, there's all these different channels out there. The point is we want to find the best way to communicate with each one of these customer segments. And again, it doesn't have to be more than one. I'll take an example again of um, for resident-owned communities, this mobile home cooperatives. So you have 65 homes on one property, and we need to make sure that the board is communicating with them, right? But they do have different customer segments. So we have one group that's not going to be receiving text messages, right? But they would prefer a flyer. So you might have different channels. So you might do a little bit of flyering, but then you might do a little bit of text messaging or Facebook or the website. And so again, identifying the different channels, but then matching them up with the different customer segments. And then again, finding which ones are most cost efficient. And you're not going to know which one works best unless you go back and do that after kind of sales and evaluation phase. And so getting feedback from your customers on how do they prefer to be communicated with, right? This is something that you could easily do initially in a consumer survey. Customer relationships. This building block describes the types of relationships a company establishes with specific customer segments. So relationships can range from personal to automated. It can be driven by different motivations such as customer acquisition, customer retention, boosting sales, right? And so you might maintain a different relationship if you're trying to reach new customers versus retain the current customers you have, right? So that's important to keep in mind. These are the several categories for customer relationships. So personal assistance. So this can happen through a point of sales, through call centers, by email, by websites. I don't know of any. There's probably food co-ops might fall into some of this a little bit. Dedicated personal assistance, obviously a home care, a co-op would be a great example. There's self-service, so you have no direct relationship with the customers. Not sure of a co-op example for this one, but kind of a self-service model where you're not going to be putting in that effort to reach out to customers. There's also automated services as well. So this is more about the relationship. This is more about maintenance, where the previous segment is about reaching them. This is about like when you do reach them, what's that relationship look like? So questions to ask for this building block is, what type of relationship does each of our customer segments expect us to establish and maintain with them, right? So initially we might be guessing, but hopefully we're going to do some research into this and find out. So another example, so for maintaining, say if you're a food co-op, for maintaining your owners, maybe it's having that newsletter. Maybe it's doing coupons on a monthly basis, right? And reaching out. Maybe it's having cooking classes. Maybe, and for even for other types of co-ops, maybe it's doing community, like volunteering in your local community, I think is a great one. So the other question is to ask is, which ones have we established? If you're a startup, you might have not established any. How costly are they? Also really important to know. And how are they integrated with the rest of our business model? This question, how costly are they, comes up a lot. And there's a specific building block, especially just for that. This is revenue streams. And so we're not gonna, I really wanted to focus more on things that are related to customers and marketing, since this is a marketing symposium. But just know that revenue streams, being able to identify your different revenue streams is going to be really important. And again, you can have different revenue streams depending on if you have different services. Um, this is a question I often ask um, newcomers to the co-ops that maybe have a business idea, um, but it's not really clear. It's like, well, how are you making money? What are your revenue streams? So just kind of outlining that in your business model. Again, we're not going to go into the different ways to generate revenue streams or the different pricing mechanisms, but I'll make sure that I'm going to pass along some resources so you guys can take a deeper dive into that if you're interested. But in terms of marketing, you might have different revenue streams based on your different customer segments or those key activities, which is another building block. Oh, but let's go over these questions really quick for revenue streams. I think these are important. What price are our customers really willing to pay? All right. Again, a consumer survey would help answer this question, right? And sometimes you don't ask that question directly. Maybe in a food co-op kind of consumer survey, you are going to ask things like household income or how much do they typically spend on a monthly basis on groceries, right? So you don't directly have to ask that question, but you can ask it indirectly. Knowing what they are currently paying. So this is doing your market research. What are your competitors in your areas charging, right? How are they currently paying, right? Well, we know a lot of people now are using credit card or mobile. How would they prefer to pay? How much does each revenue stream contribute to the overall revenues? So also a very important question. So if there is one revenue stream that contributes much more, maybe your marketing strategy should focus on that revenue stream or that customer segment that's bringing in that revenue stream. Key resources. So this building block describes the most important assets required to make the business model work. So key resources allow a business to create and offer a value proposition, reach markets, maintain relationships with customers, segment, and earn revenue. So key resources can be physical, they can be financial, intellectual, or human, right? In a co-op, there's key resources are often going to be a human component to it. And key resources can be owned or leased by the business or acquired from key partners. So hopefully a co-op development center is going to fit this list as a key resource. There's also key partners as well. Maybe a key resource for a co-op could also be your startup capital in the terms of member equity, right? So maybe you raise $10,000 in member equity. You can count that as a key resource that you can leverage to maybe get a loan. And then also looking within the startup group or maybe within the steering committee. Your steering committee might bring in some much needed skills that would help the co-op start up, right? So maybe that's helping to draft a financial pro forma, that skill as a key resource. And you want to make sure that you identify the most important ones and then tie those with your customer segments or revenues. So what questions to ask for defining this? Well, what key resources do our value proposition require? That's a really good one. What does our value proposition require? What do our distribution channels require? And the same thing goes for customer relationships and revenue streams, right? And so what key resources are we going to need to do awareness with our customers? What key resources are we going to need to maintain those relationships with our customers? key activities. So key activity building block describes the most important things a company must do in order to make the business work. This is a pretty simple one. Key activities can be grouped into production, problem solving, or a platform or network. Problem solving is a big one. And so production can also be something that you'll see a lot with producer cooperatives, platform or network. There is such thing as platform co-ops, which fit into these key activities. And what platform co-ops provide is a service that can help lower costs. And so maybe that is an online food ordering app that food co-ops can use. Maybe it's for taxi co-ops for customers to find taxi co-ops. There's a lot of different ways to utilize platform cooperatives. What key activities does your value proposition require? And then you just repeat this question with each of the with each of the building blocks. Okay, so key activities or key partners. This building block looks at a network of partners that make your business model work. Partnerships are becoming the cornerstone of many business models. Companies create alliances to optimize their business models. They create alliances to reduce risk and acquire resources. I think key partners are important for any business, both for-profit and nonprofit. I think they are especially important for cooperatives. And again, this is where a co-op development center could fall into, hopefully as a key partner for maybe getting your business model off the ground. There could be key partners that are maybe aligned to the values of the co-op, right? It doesn't, again, have to be financial. So again, the co-op is more than just a business. There's values attached to that. Are there nonprofits in your area that share those same values? Are there resources that those nonprofits that you can leverage with the co-op? And so it's important to look at key partners that way, not just in a way to kind of optimize and increase revenue. Also really important. But again, we want to frame this in a lens of being a co-op. So there are 4 primary different types of partnerships. Strategic alliances between non-competitors, competition with strategic partnerships. You could form strategic partnerships with competitors. I've seen this with tech co-ops, and the way they do this is that maybe there's a project that is kind of out of their scope, and so they will refer it over to another tech co-op. There's joint ventures to develop new businesses. And then there's sometimes buyer-supplier relationships. I think maybe Arizmendi kind of is falling into that last category of buyer-supplier relationships. I'm not sure they're there yet. So there are 3 primary motivations for creating partnerships: optimization and economy of scale. So the most basic is a buyer-supplier relationship, reduction of risk and uncertainty, and acquisition of particular resources and activities. So questions to ask: who are our key partners? Who are our key suppliers? What resources are we acquiring from partners? And so what resources do we actually need? And what key activities do partners perform? And how are we doing on time? I'm actually going to skip this one, but obviously this is really important as well. So identifying the cost structure and try to line it up again with the different, with the other building blocks. So you might have a cost associated with maintaining those customer relationships. We want to make sure that that is in the business model canvas. This is not supposed to be your 10-year pro forma. This is not a detailed budget. We're really focusing on the main costs. And then maybe for this exercise, if we want to do a business model canvas that's really focused on a marketing plan, you would just focus on cost structure for marketing. And so let's talk about how we actually do this as a group. Again, it's going to be a little bit hard to do this as a group in person. But there are a couple of tools. So one of them is Strategizer. And Strategizer is actually the creator of this. Well, it is the online platform for this. Canvanizer also exists. I'll share that with you in a little bit. But these are online platforms. And I think, so this is Strategizer. I'm already signed in. And they have a lot of great free resources that you can access for free. You can also get a month trial. And what I've done with some co-ops is just get that month trial and take time to actually complete it online. So this is good for co-ops that have to work remotely. And so this is one way to do it. Even if you don't use the online tool, I recommend just kind of going in and checking out the resources. I really like this test card, which I'll show you. This kind of falls along the lines of turning assumptions into knowledge. And it goes like this. We believe that, and then you put your assumption in there. To verify that, we will, and so maybe that is your consumer survey. And then you have test cost and, well, how reliable is this data going to be? And measure, maybe it's consumer willingness to shop at the food co-op. And we are right, and then you put how we know if we're right. So it's a good card to test your assumptions. It kind of structures turning assumptions into knowledge. So this again, this slide, what you would need if we're doing this in person, I would say like a large whiteboard. I have one in my office. You could use a laminated poster size canvas. So I actually put a link to this, so you'll have this. It's a large PDF of the canvas that you can print out and laminate. Different color Post-its. It's really important, right? Because maybe you're going to have different customer segments, and you want to color code this. Permanent markers and a camera to kind of take note of the progress being made. For Post-its, I think it's important. I'm going to share with you a tip. Let me find some Post-its. If you remember anything from this presentation, you should remember this, and it's how to actually peel a Post-it correctly. So what you don't want to do is peel a Post-it up like this. This is how most people peel a Post-it. Because then when you put it on, it just kind of flips up like that. It's not a great view. So what you want to do is peel a Post-it to the side, from the side, and then it lays flat. I don't know if you can tell. Much better, a lot better to read. So that's how you peel a Post-it. And the whole purpose is to crowdsource. So again, this is a good brainstorming activity that you can do as a group. So the way you start off is everybody just kind of puts an idea up there. So right, maybe if you're going with customer segments, everybody takes 5 minutes to jot down what customer segments they think are important. you put them all up on the board, and then you consolidate. So you find themes. Well, 5 people said this one customer segment was important, so you know that's a good one, right? And then you organize them into these different things. We can take it a step further by doing a little bit of voting. So if you have a lot of people, way too many customer segments to fit on your business model canvas, and you want to keep it simple, right? You can just use little stickers and vote, choose the top 5. Um, these are some of the best practices. And so again, one of my favorite ones is um, turning assumptions into knowledge. And so that card I showed you was a good way to do that. So basically, you might come up with the different customer segments, but you really want to find out if that's just an assumption. So actually do your research and find out what they are. You could do a preliminary survey, but then once you're actually operating, you kind of want to do some research again and then reevaluate that. So you can start off with some assumptions or some guesses, some loose guesses. Hopefully you did some research, but then once you're already operating, come back to this business model canvas, because remember, it's evergreen, um, and update it. Be precise. This is really important with the business model canvas. You want to just put like 1 or 2 words on the post-it. It try to forces you to be concise. So we're not trying to go for a whole sentence here, right? And so being precise, brevity is key here. You can save the detail for that 15-minute business plan. For the business model canvas, you want to go with keywords. Color coding, again, is really important. So there's a lot of different ways to color code, but it's good to have 16 different colors of Post-it notes handy, or maybe permanent markers. And granularity is important to know. It's good to know, are we being too granular, right? Do we need a step back and have that balcony level view? Maybe we want 2 different business model canvases. Maybe we want that that higher vision, that balcony level view, but maybe we want to get a little bit granular for, say, a marketing plan, because you can use this canvas just specifically, say, for a marketing strategy or for a specific service that you're offering. And then just putting it to work. So implementation and application. So after your canvas is complete, it's good to create a shared doc. Transparency is key here. You can assign individuals or groups of people to research each one of these building blocks. And so maybe you start off as a group, but then you kind of separate and you dive deep into each one of the building blocks. So maybe somebody's going to take customer segments, someone's going to take customer relationships, someone's going to take key partners. And so you can start together and then do some more deeper research. And then research and test your assumptions. This is a link to the card that you see. Again, a lot of those resources are available on the website. And then create a narrative for each segment. So we started off with keywords, but let's start creating that narrative. Let's start building out our story, and we can use that narrative in the business plan. And so I think this is your business model canvas is kind of like an outline. It's your headers, right? And then within each one of those headers, you start putting in that content and that narrative. And that's the end. One more thing I want to show you. In addition to Strategizer, there's also something called Miro.com, and I believe this is free. They have a lot of great diagrams. Again, I'm bringing up these tools because we're doing a lot of remote work. We're in a virtual environment. So this was a great free way to actually do the business model canvas. It has a lot of other canvases as well available on Canva Advanced, product roadmaps. And this was free. I'm sure that there is there's some paid aspect to this, obviously at Upgrade, but Miro is another way to do this online. And then there's also Mural, two companies that built almost a near identical product and came up with a very close, very similar name. I'm not sure how. But I've used this with co-ops as well. This has a lot of other great things besides the business model canvas that's related to business strategy that I really like. And I believe there's a premium version, but they were giving out 3-month free trials as well. So again, just some other tools to keep in mind besides Strategizer. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I'll stay online to take any more questions that we may have.
And thank you, Daniel. I have one question right off the bat. So in the service industry, and I kind of mentioned it earlier, we use the term connectors, and I'm wondering how that really plays out in the canvas, where they go. Are they partners or are they customers? And these are people, again, who facilitate getting customers to your organization, whether it's like a hotel clerk or a bartender calling a cab, or maybe it's somebody else. I guess even today you might even refer to the social media influencers, right? Not that any of our co-ops are that big to really benefit from it, but we can dream.
Yeah, those connectors are really important, and that that kind of lines up with customer acquisition and awareness, and so those connectors are going to be really important in your probably both your customer relationships and channels, because those connectors are going to be the channel to your customer, but they also might be a way that maintains those relationships. So maybe those connectors are maintaining relationships with current customers as well.
And then the other dynamic I was thinking about is with overall customer value. So I know sometimes you might have a customer that has a relatively higher cost of doing business, but because they're stable and they provide a lot of business, they become kind of a big customer, but they might also be pushing out more profitable customer segments. And where does that get teased out?
Yeah, definitely within customer segments, but tying that to those revenue streams and seeing how that matches up. When you say pushing other customer segments out, what do you mean?
Well, so I'm using, my CAD background, but for years we had a school contract with with the public schools. So we would pick up children who maybe were in transitional housing or had other issues where they couldn't be on the bus, and we would give them service. So basically at 2:40 to 3:30 every afternoon, pretty much every single cab had school children in it, which meant that anyone trying to get to the airport or anywhere else wasn't going to get service from us. And of course, people going to the airport, are taking longer trips, they're spending more money, they're tipping better, whereas the school was getting pretty heavily discounted, but they also provided like 90 rides within this hour window every day. So it was this trade-off of when do you say maybe this is a really stable account, but maybe we're actually better off rolling the dice and seeing what we can get on the open market.
Yeah, it kind of goes back to like those different customer segments and which one of these is most important. And it's not always clear cut, because it's great that you're providing that value for those kids, right?
Right.
But they might not be the highest, bringing in the most revenue. It's a hard thing, and it's a thing that luckily co-ops are actually trying to make those decisions, whereas other companies wouldn't even probably glance. They just look at directly the revenue streams. And so maybe you can say, well, how can we afford to do maybe some of this at least, right? Maybe just a little bit. Obviously, if you can't keep it up and put your business on the ground, there's certain decisions that you're going to have to make to keep the business afloat and to support the overall mission and the other values of the co-op. But that's a tricky one, weighing the pros and cons.
Or any other?
Sorry, John, go ahead.
No, no, go ahead. No, I was going to ask if there are any other comments or questions, so please jump in.
I was just going to riff off of what you just mentioned. We have a cooperative that is still pre-concept. You know, we're still doing the brainstorming stage, but it is a group of monolingual Spanish-speaking women who want to form, mostly immigrants, who want to form a house remodeling cooperative. And the reason for doing that, so they started with the benefit to them and the benefit to their community. And then the follow on to that is, okay, but how can we make money? So their question is, could we form this cooperative such that we can arrange it so we can take care of our kids and our grandparents and all the other family members that we're taking care of at the same time as we're learning a skill that's higher income than some of the others, which we traditionally do. And at the same time, helping rehab the homes that surround us, which are in terrible shape, for free. So that's where they started, is those two things: benefits to us, benefits to our community. And then from there, they're going to, okay, well, if we're going to do that, we need to have a way to make money. So they've done some initial research that shows that in other parts of town where people have more money than in the parts of town they live in, people will pay, I don't know what their numbers are, but above the going rate to have a cooperative of women come in and remodel their homes. So they're going at it kind of backwards, and which is awesome, but I'm wondering how you capture that in this business canvas.
Yeah, I often see people come with what they really want to start off with is a nonprofit, more than a co-op, which is great. We like where that heart is, right? And there's a lot of similarities, but a co-op is a for-profit business. And we just kind of keep going to, well, in order for you to do those nonprofit services, we need to make sure that there is money to sustain that. And the easiest way to kind of make that real is to create a financial pro forma, I found, and have that budget item, whether it be like community service, right? And that's an expense that you're going to be spending your time on. And how does that fit into the budget? And then when they see that numbers, they're like, well, oh, we can't pay ourselves and do this. At least help start the conversation. Well, how much can we do? Maybe it's not that 10. Maybe that's 10,000. That was way too much of our time. Let's start off with 2,000. And as we grow into year 7, look, we can actually do more for our community. But starting off small.
Yeah, I think that's and interestingly, they came to that by themselves, but we haven't gotten far enough along to put actual numbers to all of this. So they came to the okay, but we've got to do something that makes money too piece, so that we can do these other things, which I thought was fascinating.
Yeah.
So they're working backwards, but that's a really good point, is that we need to get numbers that are real enough so they can do a pro forma, so they can figure out, you know, could we do 5% this and 95% that, or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks.
There's a great question in the chat from Pat. Any techniques on how to measure success beyond the economics?
That is a great question. So yes, one thing that I think is important to start with is co-create and co-define what success looks like. Because success might look a little bit different for the co-op and the people that you're serving and customers. So find out what that success metric is, and then to find that out is actually doing research and surveys and using those surveys to measure your success, which is, yeah, very important. Benchmarking, very, very important. And then you can keep track of this all out, throughout the years.
Okay. Are there any other comments or questions? Otherwise, we can wrap up a little bit early today.
If there is some extra time, it would be awesome. The thing that we have most difficulty with on the business canvas is trying to walk people through how the different blocks connect, and going through that process. So if you have some words of wisdom on how to do that in a coherent manner, that would be great.
Not in a very concise manner, but I will say one of these slides that I will present, it reiterates the interconnectedness, and it asks the questions and it draws the lines together. So asking the questions were designed to draw the lines together. So if we use those questions with your group, it will help. And yeah, it's all interconnected. I don't know, and yeah, you can, that's why the color coding with the Post-its is really important, because it kind of helps show that interconnectedness. Often in the whiteboard, we're drawing lines. But yes, it is all interconnected. Your revenue streams with your customer segments, with the channels, your cost structure, right? It's all interconnected. So using those questions will force people to think in that way.
That's good.